And I'd like to welcome everybody to day 2 of our business meeting. And once again, would like to thank Dean Bingham and the folks here at Helena College for their wonderful hospitality and for hosting us both yesterday and today. They've done an outstanding job during this meeting. So Dean, wherever you are, thank you. We're now at the time in the agenda where we will turn the microphone over to our 2-year committee. So I'm going to do that and pass the microphone over to Regent Krause. Regent Krause?
Thank you, Regent Tuss. We will start out our meeting today with a presentation from Ms. Pam Busey, Commissioner of Labor and Industry. I hope I said that right. And to introduce her, I'll ask Dr. Seck to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It's a great pleasure to introduce this topic today. Over the course of the past 2 years, the Montana University System and the Montana Department of Labor and Industry have enjoyed an amazing partnership and desire to collaborate. The Montana Department of Labor and Industry, Commissioner Pam Busey and Commissioner Christian, have been focused on new ways to leverage partnership opportunities between our two agencies with special focus on 2-year education, workforce development, and apprenticeships. One area we have collaborated very closely was with the 4 rounds of the U.S. Department of Labor TAC grants. I would like to share with you a few statistics that might surprise you. Over the 4 years that Montana received TAC grants, we received approximately $52 million, or were awarded $52 million. That also includes the work the tribal colleges did. I'd like to give you a comparison of some other states. North Dakota was awarded $42 million during the same period. Oregon, $30 million. Nevada, $24 million. Nebraska, $18 million. Idaho, $15 million. Utah, $13 million. Wyoming, $11 million. Only the state of California, with $65 million for their 4 TAC grants, came in ahead of Montana among the witchy states. I truly believe the level of success that Montana has had would not have happened without the partnership the Montana University System has enjoyed with the Montana Department of Labor and Industry. Commissioner Busey and her staff have worked with us on every one of those grants. And as we heard this morning during the faculty breakfast, those grants are producing huge opportunities for faculty innovation and new student opportunities. It is my pleasure to welcome Commissioner Pam Busey.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. This is a very exciting time to be in the business of workforce development, particularly in Montana. As you can see in the handout, and I did provide you a short handout that is mostly economic data, but I do think it frames what it is we're going to be talking about, and certainly why we have been collaborating in the strategic ways that we have been. But as you can see, Montana's unemployment rate fell to 4.2% in January. We're back in a range that's considered normal unemployment by economists, meaning that there is a healthy amount of job mobility happening in Montana. And actually, it's more than healthy. We have about 90,000 people changing jobs every quarter in Montana, which has never happened historically. And that's good because it creates better job matches, better uses our human capital. Wage growth has outpaced the national average and has been higher than inflation, also not something that's happened in a long time in Montana. And low unemployment and higher wages certainly mean increased opportunity for Montana workers. However, the state of our workforce does pose some very significant challenges, and to solve these challenges, we all certainly have to work together as a cohesive education and workforce development system. We must also work very hard to strengthen our partnerships with the private sector. As illustrated in Figure 3, we are facing an aging workforce. About 27% of Montana's workforce is eligible to retire and are 55 or older right now. with those retirements potentially reducing the workforce by about 137,000 people in the next 10 years. The group of young workers entering the labor force, age 16 to 24, is simply not big enough to accommodate these retirements, with the total population of 16 to 24-year-olds being only about 113,000. So retraining in Montana needs to occur quickly, and if at all possible, it needs to occur on the job, because we simply do not have time to have workers take 2 to 4 years out of the workforce to be retrained. So training also must meet the needs of Montana's 21st century economy. To increase worker productivity, we must keep up with the technology demands of the workplace and provide avenues for students and workers to gain specialized skills that employers are asking for. Figure 4 illustrates Montana's changing economy. While some industries, such as healthcare, continued to grow throughout the recession, construction did not. Our unemployment rate has recovered, but the simple fact is Montana's economy does not look the same as it did prior to the recession. Projections show that construction will not recover until about 2023, the job opportunities that they had prior to the recession. So that means we have a pool of unemployed workers that don't have the skills to meet the new jobs that are out there. As all of you know, education creates opportunities for workers to earn more money, support their families, and have more employment choices in their economy. These facts are well known, and they're illustrated in figures 5 and 6. We're all here today because we know that education is the best investment that we can make in our state. Figure 6 also demonstrates a very important point. In terms of wages, workers with some college earn about the same as workers with just a high school diploma. To realize wage benefits, workers must graduate and earn some kind of a meaningful credential. Montana faces worker shortages and growth in high-skilled sectors now more than ever. We must make our education and training systems more efficient, more nimble, and more in line with private sector needs. I'd like you to pay close attention to figures 7 and 8. Figure 8 illustrates data that we at the Department of Labor and Industry feel is often overlooked. On-the-job training, or OJT, is a huge part of preparing Montana's workforce, and it will continue to be in the future. As figure 6 shows, formal education and training will continue to be extremely important, but we cannot overlook the role that on-the-job training plays across the occupational spectrum. Employers do invest in training their workers, even when workers start day one with a degree. As we work to make our education and workforce system more efficient and effective for the people we serve, we must look at the return on taxpayer and student investment in education. Matt Springer, who I know all of you know, the director of the Rev Up grant, gives a very compelling argument for the need for wages to better match the education and training that students earn. He notes that in 2011, 66% of associate students didn't graduate. For those that do graduate, on average, students pursuing an AAS degree take 10 or more years to pay back the cost of that education. We believe that a greater focus on OJT and embedding industry-recognized credentials into the AAS programs will make the difference for those students. Connecting students to the workforce through programs like Registered Apprenticeship will enable them to reduce their student debt, ensure employment upon graduation, and provide real-time incentives for completing their training. Figure 7 illustrates the value that industry-recognized credentials provide to workers. This study was conducted, and it's a brand new study conducted by the U.S. Census Bureau. The intention was to quantify and qualify alternative industry-recognized credentials. A good example of this credential is the National Institute of Metalworking Skills, or the NIMS credential, that is now embedded into the Rev Up machining CAS degree. As Figure 7 demonstrates, adding an alternative industry-recognized credential adds a wage premium at just about every level of education. The only place it doesn't help is if you have a PhD. On average, a person with an associate's degree and an alternative credential will earn nearly 20% more than a person with just an associate's degree. I'm extremely proud of the partnership that is developed between the Department of Labor and the university system. The last page of my handout outlines some of the key initiatives that we are undertaking together. Certainly one of the most successful is the new partnership that DLI is engaged in the TACT program, which you just heard about, in workforce development for advanced manufacturing, energy, and healthcare jobs. Throughout this program, we have partnered with MUS to support a new cadre of employment specialists, and we're calling them workforce navigators, although I think they're called something else in the healthcare grant. But these are shared by job services, and these are jobs shared by job services in two-year campuses. Workforce navigators are asked to work closely with students, providing consistent contact to help anticipate and overcome challenges to success. In my world, we call this case management. In your world, you call it intrusive advising, I learned, and now I keep track of that term. And work closely with businesses to initially understand hiring needs and connect each business with a filtered group of students that might be a best match for each employer. And you all call that intrusive placement. I love those words, so now I always include them in my, but just anecdotally, we were talking to the navigator here, and he has said that he has referred 80 people to Helena College. So by bridging the labor and education systems, these workforce navigators are able to capitalize on a broader range of funding streams and support services to benefit job seekers. And just for example, we've recently changed the rules at the Department of Labor, state rules, to allow apprentices to qualify both for student aid, but for incumbent worker and primary sector training. So it's 3 new opportunities for funding for employers and for students that they didn't have last year, or as they certainly wouldn't have known about last year. As we continue to invest workforce development and higher education, we must strive to identify credentials of value, those credentials, certificates, degrees, and other training achievements that are meaningful to employers. We must also invest in career and college prep programs like MCS and Big Sky Pathways and ensure that they work together to provide a seamless experience for students and job seekers. Together, we really can modernize and integrate apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship models into a broad array of occupations and educational settings. This model will help to improve student outcomes and meet the needs of employers and improve the return on investment for training. By investing in our partnership, targeting industry-recognized credentials, and focusing on initiatives that increase the effectiveness of our programs, we can shorten the time students take to finish school, find a job, and achieve the gainful employment to a meaningful career. I really want to thank Commissioner Seck for all of his work. He really does push everybody, all of us, to start speaking the same language. It's why I'm using your language now more than ever. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you today. I am on the road all the time speaking to Montana businesses. They are starting to hear what's happening. They're at least curious about what's happening. But as all of you know, they're still relatively critical of both of our systems, that we're not responding to their needs quickly enough. Some of that may not be accurate, but we are trying to provide as many opportunities as we can for them to talk to us. So we're in the process right now of setting up a workforce summit that will occur in September that will have tracks that will allow sectors to speak directly to labor officials, commerce officials, and hopefully as many of you as can make that summit so that we can hear some real information about what it is that they need. I know it's just as frustrating for you when we hear that we're giving them workers that don't have the skills that they need. But we really have, through the Main Street program, been pushing back, saying, then tell us exactly what that is. Tell us what credentials mean something in your industry. Tell us what soft skills are missing, and tell us what tests are meaningful to you, that are believable to you, so that if we administer them either at the job service or at the high school or at any of your institutions, it means something and we're just not making a student take another test. And they're starting to hear from us. I've been speaking to every one of the key industry networks that the governor has put together for the Main Street project, and that is the #1 question that all of those key industry networks are looking at. is how to speed up workforce development, but also how to specifically articulate what those sectors need from all of us. So I think the next year or two will be very interesting. I think we will have some meaningful input from the private sector and some meaningful economic data to help guide us in prioritizing what are becoming, of course, more limited resources. So thank you so much for inviting me here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for that. It's very interesting, and I wanted to thank you for the outreach efforts on the road all the time. That is very important. You seem like it seems unique to have you as a very high-level official being our outreach to employers, but maybe that's the way it gets effective, and so thank you very much for that.
Yeah, and I would reiterate, I guess, it's not just me. There's a team of folks out there right now, including John Seck, who have been meeting with private sector employers for this entire year since we started the Main Street project.
Thank you. And thanks for coming today. So questions? Yes, ma'am. Regent Sheehy.
I have a comment and a question. First of all, Pam, it's really good to see you again.
You
It's
too.
been a while.
Thanks.
My comment is, I wondered if you or your office has been involved in our next presentation, the performance learning assessment. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I've heard a lot about
Okay.
it. I personally haven't been involved, but I can tell you, I mean, and just when you look at the data of all the some college out there, it's a very important initiative for the governor to quantify that and make those credits meaningful in some, whether it be a credential or getting those folks into something that will lead to a meaningful credential. So yes, I know a lot about it. I think it's an important initiative. And
I'm glad you're in that loop, because as I read through the materials from this level, it looked like they're related. And it
Oh,
sounds like
absolutely.
you are all making those connections as well.
yes.
My question is about Figure 7. Am I reading this correctly, that you make less if you get a master's degree?
No, that's not what it means. What it means is the premium on getting a credential is less if you have a master's degree than
the
getting
other
another
degrees.
industry-recognized credential.
So does that figure take into account the expense of getting the degree and the payback period that you were talking
Yes,
about?
those figures, that they do take into account, but the point of that figure is to really emphasize how important these industry-recognized credentials are. They really do just increase your wages. Because they are probably just as meaningful or more to some particular industry sectors than just a degree.
Okay.
It's just more specialized training for employers.
Yes. Regent Robinson.
Thank you. Chair Kraus, I wanted to thank you, Commissioner Busey, for your department's collaboration with higher education. I think we're starting to see the results of that right now. A question I had for you, and I'm sure that you have to deal with a lot of needs out there in the business sector, and you can't meet every single need equally. So in looking at your data here, it sounds like, I guess I have a question about the construction jobs. When you talk about construction, you're talking about residential and commercial and all construction jobs.
Correct.
Total, right?
Yes.
So it's going to take some time to recover from the jobs that were held before the recession, is what this indicates. But yet at the same time, we're seeing other areas where there's a lot of growth, a lot of potential, healthcare industry. It sounds like leisure activities here. Do you see other areas, or are you hearing of other areas when you're out there meeting with our business leaders where we should be directing our efforts in order to, you were talking about retraining and making sure that what we're doing from our perspectives is helping to meet their needs. And I know that we're doing that as well, but I'm just curious from your perspective of meeting with the business leaders directly. Have you heard of other industries that we should be focusing on?
Absolutely. I think we've done a pretty good job of targeting some of the most high demand with those TACT grants, and so that's energy, manufacturing, and healthcare. Those are absolutely some of the most high demand occupations. I would say probably topping that or coming very close to healthcare is IT. So our next round of grant applications are really going to be focusing on IT. We had, Regent Johnstone will understand this, but I talked a lot in our initial phases and after our last Labor Day report on productivity in Montana. We have a lot of educated people, but we're still not as productive as other states, productive meaning outputs. And that is because we don't have as much IT, frankly. We just don't have as high of technology, and we aren't able to talk to each other like they are in major metropolitan areas. We don't get to spread best practices in as easy of a way because of the geography of Montana. So I think if we can focus on the next step, it's going to be IT and trying to figure out ways that we can bring people together technologically as well as just have more IT. We need more programmers, we need more network administrators, we need more IT in every way, both for skills at workplaces, but we need it just as importantly to make sure that we're talking to one another and that industry sectors are talking to one another so that we can be more productive in Montana.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and I think it's definitely a number one because I represent part of rural Montana, and I live in rural Montana, and that's one of the things as a business owner myself that I found I struggle with is just having the ability to get online and do business in the same way that you can in Billings or the same way that you can in Denver or somewhere else. And so I think that is an area that we should all be focused on as well, to try to not only help to build that infrastructure, but then creating those jobs to help support that infrastructure as well. So thank you.
Yeah, so, and excitingly, we just brought on the first 2 IT apprentices in the state of Montana, all in state government. We have a programmer and a network administrator apprentice coming on one with the Department of Labor and one with the Department of Administration. So that'll be the first time that's been done in Montana.
Other questions? Regent Johnstone?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kraus. A couple of observations, as you might expect, had something to do with the Main Street Montana project. I guess I would encourage you to continue the conversation with the private sector, but do so with some balance and temperament. As a business person, and the same with major, you're going to consistently get demands, requests from the private sector, and I think you have to balance those with your own broad overview of what's necessary. So, but to me, initiating, encouraging the conversation may be the most important thing, and this is an area where we should be careful not to let the perfect get in the way of the good. We'll make some mistakes, but I think starting the conversation and the dialogue that I've seen, and frankly, just talking to business people around the state after Main Street, there's a lot of energy and a lot of optimism. So you're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions? So I have a question, and I'm not sure which one of you, because it seems like you guys are working together, and that's great. What is the nexus between, so I guess I'm looking at it from a job seeker's perspective. What is the nexus that ties these programs together? You know, people here are used to hear me saying marketing, which is odd for an accountant. But I think, so I want to know about TACT grants. I want to know about retraining. I want to know about your guiding me to employers and opportunities. What's the nexus for that between the university system and the people that work for you?
I think we'll both probably have something to say about that. From my perspective, I feel like it needs to be more data-driven. We really need to talk about what occupations are out there and how quickly we can get people into them. So I think things like the workforce navigators, people that really understand and understand the workforce development system and all the programs that fund that so they can incentivize employers to bring people on. So I think they really are a natural nexus, but they don't, interestingly, they haven't always connected. When we first started having these conversations about, how you all decide where to put your resources,
Yeah.
and I said, what economic data do you use? We're not even all using MCIS. We've all come on board. Everybody, luckily, we're still missing some school districts, but everybody's on board to make that system. So at least we're all speaking the same language. We're using the same data. Our students are seeing it. Their parents are seeing it. And hopefully we're going to be able to leverage that into more information for students about apprenticeship or any kind of on-the-job training. Apprenticeship has probably been the most difficult to meld to the two
Yes.
because it is so foreign to what all of you do generally. But I think you're starting to see some pretty incredible models out there. Dean Bingham has set up with a private employer a sheet metal training program that is absolutely on the job. These students are working full-time the entire time they're getting this credential, and they will come out with an apprenticeship certificate, and they will come out with an associate's degree. Those students signed on for that. They know that it took a little longer than if they just did their apprenticeship certificate, but they were willing to do that. Northern Montana College is leading the way in traditional trade apprenticeships. They have hundreds, literally hundreds of electricians, plumbers, and diesel mechanics that are apprenticing. So there's certainly models out there. What we all need to do is be able to really talk to employers and students about what those look like, because it really does. We'd like to see employers stepping up and paying more of those costs, and they really do need to make it a good return on investment for students. But when you can incentivize it, which we're trying to do also, we have a bill for an apprenticeship tax credit. So we're trying to find ways to incentivize employer engagement, at least initially, to let them try some of these sort of alternative approaches to training their workforce. Because frankly, they just rely on us to do it, and they haven't so far been much in the input phase of what's our curriculum look like, how does that work for you? So really, I think Regent Johnstone is correct, just opening up that dialogue in a meaningful way. And really, when you hear employers saying, we have one of your students and they couldn't do the job the first day, well, most places they can't do that. They need to invest some in training too. So if we can do it collaboratively, it's going to be quicker and less expensive for everybody, the student and the employer. So they really are a natural nexus. Some of them have been real natural. Some of them are a little harder, like the apprenticeship program, but I'm very excited about the changes that are being made both in our office and because I can tell you our apprenticeship people, they're tradespeople. They have no idea what you all do, but they're figuring it out. They're learning.
Mr.
John.
Chair, members of the board, just to add to that, last Friday, Commissioner Busey and about 6 or so members of her team met with several of our group from the Montana University system, including Chancellor Kegel and Interim Dean Kratky and several other folks at City College for a planning retreat on this new apprenticeship grant. And I think that meeting was a really good meeting because I think it really helped connect what we do in higher education and two-year education with what the apprenticeship department does and how we can work better together. We designed, as a result of that meeting, a survey that was actually sent out this week to, was it 20,000?
35,000.
35,000. And as of about 2 days ago, there were nearly 500 responses. And it's probably gone up since then.
Yeah, it's much higher. I didn't look today, but
And,
we're having good responses.
One of the things we did with that survey is we described this partnership opportunity that we're looking at with this Department of Labor grant and asked those businesses and industries if they have an interest to work with us, to let us know. And as of a couple days ago, we had almost 200 respond that they had an interest. And Annie Glover was disaggregating the data, and it was demonstrating a mix of everything from IT to manufacturing to healthcare. So it's very encouraging. And I think as we went around the table at the end of that meeting last Friday at City College, I think the takeaway for me is that we need to do this work, whether we get this U.S. Department of Labor grant or not, because it's the right thing to do to address these common needs.
Thanks for that answer, and I think I have every confidence that the two of you are getting it done on this level. I really do. I think we're really figuring that out. As a person sitting around this table who was a carpenter's apprentice, a member of the Brotherhood of Railway Carmen Union guy that went back to school and did what you were just talking about, right? Lost his job, changed his career. I can tell you that it's an intimidating process, right? And I'm not sure that we are telling the story we want to tell to the people that are out there trying to do that. I guess I would make that point. I did something I remember called World of Work through the job service, right? World of Work it was called, and it was pretty basic stuff, let me tell you. None of the things that you talked about were there. No guides to other apprenticeship programs, no evaluation of what the top 10 industries to get in, It was just casting around, throwing darts at a dartboard, basically. Unfortunately, I ended up at Montana State University, right? But that changed my life. But I think that there are people out there wanting to do exactly what you said. This group of people with some college, no college, but one career who are looking to change their lives. I'm not sure we're reaching them yet. And so, I don't think the employers know they're there, and the would-be employees that are looking to change their life don't know the employers are there. And I guess that's what that would be my point. I go to the job service all the time, Ms. Busey. Every one Friday a month, I go to the veteran service providers in Bozeman. It's at the job service. I talk to the people there. I hang out at the advisory board for Gallatin College with the people from, that are deeply involved in this kind of stuff. So I talk about it quite a bit, and I listen quite a bit to what's going on. And I'm hoping that we do a better job of getting the word out to the people we're trying to reach. It's not a criticism at all. No. It's just I know they're out there, they're looking to improve themselves. How do we reach them kind of statement.
Yeah, and I think we just need to really think about whatever kind of resources we need, because I agree with you. And today, you wouldn't get on and see information about apprenticeship that you just described. We're in the process of doing that, but it hasn't changed dramatically probably since you looked at it originally. The MCIS system has, but like a leap pad to apprenticeship just isn't done yet. We're just now in the process of doing that. So a lot of this is very new, it's being developed, but just looking at the workforce navigators and how well anecdotally that has worked, and the grant is going to quantify that to some meaningful, there's a third-party person coming in, entity coming in to look at that and quantify it, but just anecdotally what we're hearing, that meaningful, real connection with people that are in the job services and people that are in college is making some connections that probably wouldn't have been made before. Now we need to get people to come to the job service that aren't currently doing that, and that's what we're working on as well.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? This is a pretty big piece of what we're trying to do, so any other? Yes. Regent Tuss.
Commissioner Busey, thank you for being here, and thanks for your leadership and that of Governor Bullock, particularly with regard to the Main Street Montana program. As somebody that works in the nonprofit economic development world and works with the private sector every day to create jobs and expand economic opportunity in the business sector, What are you hearing in your dialogue with these business people in terms of the expectations of the university system? Is there a gap there between what they expect us to be delivering to assist them to grow their business and Montana's private sector and what we're currently doing?
I think there is a gap. I'm not sure if it's real or perceived. That's the difficulty for me. And again, what I hear from private businesses is we have a high school student, or we have a 2-year student, or we have a 4-year student that comes to work for us, and they can't walk in day one and do the job. So they definitely are articulating that there's a skills gap. They also articulate that in addition to the skills gap, they come without the knowledge of how to be a productive worker, how to show up on time, how to dress appropriately. You know, they articulate a soft skills gap as well. So, but when you start asking, so we offer, these are the assessments we give at the job service, or these are the assessments we're using for the TACT grant. This is what they test. Is this meaningful to you? They often have never heard of those tests. They don't know what it means. They don't even know what we're testing for soft skills or hard skills. There's something that needs to be done just about education here. I mean, we are at a disadvantage in Montana because we don't have huge industry sectors. If you're in a big city, and you have a GM or a GE, or they've decided what their credentials are, they've decided what their tests are, and they're such big employers that that's pervasive. That becomes the credential that means something in that region. We just don't have those kind of employers here. So we need to do some more educating and say, what exactly do you need? And at our SWIB meeting last time, every single private employer said, we need you to test for computer skills. We need to know that people can run a computer, just basic computer skills. So we've spent the last 2 months researching what testing is out there for basic computer skills, so that an employer, if they have us run those tests, knows exactly what that worker can do when they get there. So again, yes, that's what we're hearing. When I push back and say, exactly what do you need? They don't have an answer for us. They don't have a credential. They don't have some specific curriculum requirements. I've not gotten that kind of information, and that's the next step. That's what we need to know. We need to know exactly what is lacking in a curriculum, or what kind of assessment would be helpful to them for those to bring workers in. And then we also need to be able to talk very intelligently about wages. We can't expect a student to go through the Rev-Up program and invest their own money, because at this point that's what it is. We don't have employers investing any money, and then be paid $13 an hour, when we know for a fact if someone gets a 2-year degree, they need to make at least $16 an hour to have any kind of a meaningful return on investment. And meaningful return on investment for these grants has been determined to be 4 years for an associate's degree. And right now, even some of the employers we have, the leader employers for these grants, are interested in paying TIG welders 13-something an hour, which does not pay off for these students. So we as leaders, workforce development leaders, really need to be talking to employers about wages and how, and the more we can have them invest in the training up front, the easier it's going to be for them to understand how important it is to pay someone for that level of training.
Yes, Deputy Commissioner Sack.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I think one of the things that's been a huge outcome of these grants over the past several years has been the fact that folks are working together across the board with the 2-year colleges, with the universities, with the Department of Labor, and with industry. And I really want to give a shout out to the lead colleges for the TAC grants, which include Flathead Valley Community College, Missoula College UM, and Great Falls College MSU, because those are the folks who got those grants and were the pioneers and have really done a good job of pulling everything together. You have a flyer on your table, the Regents do, that Matt Springer and his team put together that is the Rev Up flyer. And if you have a chance to check it out, it's pretty neat. In fact, you can just go to revupmontana.com, and it's an incredible website that's been developed. You can't link into any online, you can link into any online newspaper in the state, and you'll see the banner there and click on it. Plus, it's in every form of social media to get the word out to folks of the opportunities that exist. And right now it's happening with Rev Up, and we're going to expand it to healthcare next.
Regent Tuss, you still, any other questions? Then President Engstrom.
Thank you, Regent Kraus. Good morning, Commissioner Busey. Thanks for being here. Perhaps you're aware of this, but the Gallup organization just did a nationwide, pretty extensive survey of job satisfaction and job effectiveness and so on. And they asked quite a few questions about how a person's effectiveness and satisfaction relates back to the college education and the experiences they had there. And it just recently came out, and I have not yet had the chance to digest it thoroughly, but one of the messages that came through loud and clear was the more opportunities for sort of active engagement through internships, through research, practicums, those sorts of things, that increased job satisfaction pretty substantively. So I was just wondering, one, if you had seen this poll yet, or this survey, and are there lessons in there that we might adapt to Montana?
I've seen the survey, and actually the USDOL apprenticeship program has summarized that survey and sent it out to all of us, and said, you know, we told you this is how you should be training people. So I think I definitely will get it. I think we should all look at it, because the other thing, you know, there's several things that the grants were trying to do, and that one of them was employer engagement, the other was lowering student debt, and the third is to fill the skills gap. And the one thing about on-the-job training, and I say on-the-job training, I would prefer apprenticeship only because it is the model that actually pays students, but any kind of on-the-job training satisfies all of those requirements. You know, it is the only way to really get employers engaged in what we're all doing, whatever the training program is, but it's particularly the only way they're going to know what you're teaching and what they need, so that you guys can have the conversation about, if you added this to your curriculum, it would really meet this specific need, or this is what we're seeing. And unless they're doing the students are doing both things at the same time, it's really hard to get that real-time feedback. So I will digest that study, but I think there's a lot of studies over the years that indicate that. And certainly when you look at how they use human capital in Europe, they've done a much better job of connecting those private employers' needs with all of their training programs.
So if I hear Commissioner Busey say we should all look at it, then we should probably all look at it. I'm just FYI, right? So if we can get a copy of it, we'll I think the Regents will look at it. Dean Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple thoughts as I listen to the conversation. Thank you, Commissioner Busey, for being here. Appreciate your efforts and work with Dr. Seck and to your sector of higher education. A couple thoughts that have had the privilege of being in an apprenticeship myself for a number of years, as my father being a cabinet maker, and you naturally transition into that right after high school. A couple of things as I look at it now from a perspective in higher education, and speaking maybe on behalf of two-year education, I think, Commissioner Busey, two-year education is poised and prepared and ready, I believe, to move quickly. This is a new paradigm, and when you think about connecting education, formal education, and the socialization that we have actually caused over the years for industry, in that we say basically give them to us for 2 years or 4 years, and then we'll give them to you. Now we're changing that whole paradigm with this particular thought. I think two-year education is poised and ready to make huge shifts along this line. However, a couple thoughts and cautions. One, I think what's most important is that we learn to work with our advisory councils that we have in place, because that is business and industry. And if we do not bring them along, there's no hope for this to go down the road and be successful. Because you cannot have a paid internship unless they are going to help make that happen. And that's not what we've socialized in the past in doing with business and industry. We said, we'll take them, teach them, and then hand them to you. Now we're saying, we'll take them, teach them. Oh, by the way, we're going to hand them to you day one, and you pay for that person to work for you. And so that's a whole different paradigm shift. The second, I think what's very and vitally important is that we recognize that we need to redefine apprenticeship and what that really means. It could be a co-op, it could be an internship, it could be in sponsorship, and we need to expand our thought process and what we call it and how we work with that, because not every industry looks at the term apprenticeship and says, goody, gung-ho, let's go after it. Some will back away and say, absolutely not. That's attached to a paradigm that I'm not willing to go down to. And so I think we need to redefine that. And in that redefinition, I think we'll also find that we're already doing a lot of this across higher education, but we're not calling it apprenticeship, or we're not working along that vein. So a couple thoughts that I think are vitally important for us to help shift this paradigm, realign this battleship, and get it going in the direction we want to go. And that all has to come together at the same time. But if we force it, it's not going to work. It's not going to hit in a way we want it to, and it's not going to benefit our communities. And the third point I want to make is it's a lot easier to do certain things in apprenticeshiping when you're in a metropolitan area. And I think you've touched on that already. It's much more difficult to make that happen in a rural setting where you want somebody wants to become a machinist, but they live in a community where there's no industry. And so the question is why would we do that in that small community? Well, the reason we do that is because that person will probably not stay there and go someplace else, and they need to prepare ourselves. And therefore, we prepare people for a global society, not just for our own backyard. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Bingham. Any other? I know we've spent a lot of time on this. Is there anyone else that wanted to be in the conversation? Thank you so much for getting here early and helping us out with this. It's a big deal.
Yeah, no, thank you all very much for having me.
Thank you, Commissioner Busey.
The next item on the agenda then is the draft prior learning assessment policy recommendations. So we'll shake free of the first subject and move on to another fairly intense subject. Dr. Sack, looks like we got some people coming here.
As you recall, Commissioner Christian created a PLA task force in June of 2014. The task force members were nominated by each of the campuses, including two-year colleges, community colleges, regional colleges, and the flagship universities. The task force has 30 members, chaired by Susan Jones from OCHI, with broad representation, including Dr. Stephen Ludmell, chair of MUS, MSUB Chancellor Mark Nook, as well as a broad list of representatives, including registrars, academic advisors, chief academic officers, chief student services officers, faculty, and a veterans advisor. Also serving, Dr. Shannon O'Brien from the Governor's Office as Education Policy Advisor and a Department of Labor and Industry representative. This morning, Susan Jones, Chancellor Nook, and Dr. Ludmell are going to provide you with a brief overview of the task force work thus far and provide you with appropriate high-level draft policy recommendations, which will be coming to this board in May. The task force members are continuing to seek input from various groups, such as the MUS faculty, MACRO, the Association of Registrars and Admissions Officers, and from the chief academic officers. Input will be gathered through March 27th. We will begin with a brief introduction by Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Seck. My only regret is I missed Cheetos Day yesterday. For the past 8 months, the Prior Learning Assessment Task Force has been deliberating on PLA policy and guidelines considerations. In tandem with that, faculty and staff have been offered opportunities to take part in PLA-focused educational webinars and training, and then also a PLA summit. This hand-in-hand process of better understanding PLA while formulating the policy recommendations has truly created a solid baseline, we feel, for the MUS to assess college-level learning that has occurred outside of the traditional classroom. As John mentioned, our task force will continue to seek and gather input on the current policy that we have shared with you today. It is our intent that the final policy and guidelines document that we share with you in May will not only create more common ground on PLA across the system, but will raise awareness and open doors to higher education credentials for Montana's adults. Now I'm going to turn it over to Chancellor Nook.
Thank you, Susan. Chair Kraus, members of the Regents, and Deputy Commissioner Seck, thank you for the opportunity to talk about PLA. We're not going to insult your intelligence and walk you through the various pieces of this policy. We know you can read. So what I want to talk a little bit about are some of the things that went into considering this. And I want to draw your attention to the discussion that we had this morning with faculty around innovation. And think about this policy. There are a lot of things that we had to innovate on and we had to think innovatively about when we address PLA. Oftentimes when we look at PLA, we think about the faculty interaction with the students and how they assess this learning that's occurred. But there are many other things that need to be considered as well when we think about how we transcript, how we record, how we track, the impact of PLA on financial aid, the impact of PLA on the overall success of these students. All of those were things that were topics that had to come into play and had to be thought about, had to be innovated on, had to find creative solutions to. So as you look through this document, I think you'll find that this isn't policies where we have prescribed procedures for our institutions. It's really a set of guidelines. These are things for institutions to think about. These are some things that are important for us as we think about PLA, how to set up the assessment mechanisms, what types of assessment mechanisms are in there. How do we make sure that a student that gets PLA credit at one institution can transfer that credit to another institution as seamlessly as possible? So as you read through this, what you'll find is that this really is more a set of guidelines for our institutions, for our administrators, for our faculty, and for those people who have to implement what I call the back of the house operation, the impact on financial aid, how we record and transcript this, how we make sure that we can track the effectiveness of our PLA mechanisms, and whether or not PLA really does make a difference in a student's ability to reach graduation sooner. And so I think those are really the important things in looking through this set of policies as a set of regents and as the faculty and staff of our institutions move forward in analyzing what's here, developing their policies and practices, and then coming together as a system. I think what you'll see is that there's a great deal of flexibility given to our institutions in how they implement pieces of this. One of the things that I want to comment on particular, I went through this situation at another institution in the Wisconsin system, and I saw a successful implementation. What I'm proud of the work here at Montana is this goes far beyond what was done in that other system and what I've seen at the national level. The people at Cale that were helping us with this have really been impressed isn't the right word, blown away probably is, with the level of innovation that the committee and the institution of MUS has put into this, in clearly defining PLA, breaking it into pieces and defining those pieces, as things that are instructional and things that were pre-instructional before they got those credits without sitting in a classroom. They got the knowledge, the learning without sitting in a classroom. And that has really stretched the concept of what PLA is and how it interacts with the accrediting body. In our case, the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities. Because the Northwest Commission on Colleges and Universities sets a 25% cap on PLA. It's clear to most of us that things like AP credits are really prior learning assessment. If we include those in that 25% cap, we're in a lot of trouble. So we either need to have the commission rethink that cap, or we need to think carefully about how we schedule these. And I think one of the things that has been groundbreaking in here is the way that we have gone in and set in here in policy what counts towards that 25% cap and been clear about defining that and what doesn't. And I'm not aware of another institution that has been so clear, first in the broad understanding of what PLA is, and secondly then realizing the impact on other policies and making clear definitions about how we handle the different types. We still have a lot of work to do, especially with registrars, with financial aid people, in getting the policies on our campus established so that we can track this thing, so we don't run into trouble with our accrediting commission. But I think what this policy does is establish those guidelines so that universities can take that task on, handle it effectively, and put into place local policies that assure that students can get into college, get credit for the learning that they have that's applicable to the degree that they're going to earn, move through the system more quickly, and probably take more credits from us. So that's what I really like about what this system has been able to do as they've come together. And I really have to thank the people that set the commission up, because we didn't put just faculty on this. We didn't put just administrators on this. We didn't put just registrars on it. We brought a broad swath of people from all walks of life within higher ed to think about some of these. So I think we got a great set of policies that will really help our institutions develop the local campus policies to move us forward. Thank you. I'd like to turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Chair Krause and members of the board. I just wanted to offer a few comments about our work on this. I must admit that going into this task force, I was kind of skeptical. The task force was made up of MUS leadership, of administrators, of faculty, of advisors, and registrar staff. And each person on that committee had a different perspective. And from the faculty's perspective, we are kind of the hired skeptics. And it's not because we try to be grumpy, but really the job of the faculty, as we see it, is to maintain rigor in our curriculum. And so if you don't know much about PLA, you might think of a cheesy TV commercial that you saw that talked about, getting credit for, basically not doing too much. But really, PLA, in its pure and its strict definition, is not a workaround. This is not a way to get around requirements. The data show that students who come to us with some PLA credits persist and succeed in higher numbers than controlled matches of students who do not come with PLA. And further, they take more credits with us than students that didn't come with PLA. So it really is, it's reaching out to adult learners who might have a little bit of experience in college or other types of training. It'll help fill our pipelines, and it'll help us to achieve a higher credential rate for Montana's workforce. Let's see. I would say that the main faculty concerns, and they come out in this set of guidelines, are obviously to maintain quality. If we erode quality anyhow, we all recognize that we lose everything. So maintenance of rigor is paramount, and I think we saw on the screen yesterday sometime an MUS strategic plan bullet that emphasizes this. The most important thing that we've got in MUS is quality. And to that end, especially the faculty on the committee, on the task force, were motivated to insert language about tracking of PLA students. That is, we don't want to, there shouldn't be any special, a potentially stigmatizing note that these credits were earned in a different way, but we should allow our registrars and administration to track these students, maybe using a section number or something that's fairly innocuous, it's visible to us, but doesn't show up on the transcript as something different, and really do a rigorous job of making sure that the students that come in with PLA are just as poised to succeed in the subsequent courses as students that we trained ourselves for the equivalent course on campus. So tracking is a big, and as Chancellor Nook already mentioned, we have to be careful that students don't accumulate junk credits or credits that don't count directly toward their degree, or they could get into some trouble as far as financial aid. If they come in with a whole bunch of PLA credits, turns out just a few of them are creditable toward their degree, then they can run into a little bit of trouble, so we want to look out for that. And we also want to make sure that students that are earning credit outside of our classrooms, that we have a direct role in assessing these students. We're not big fans as faculty of outsourcing the assessment to a third party. If we haven't trained them ourselves, at least we should be able to assess them ourselves. So that's another component that's in these guidelines. But as Chancellor Nook also suggested, this looks to us, this document, PLA has been going on in the MUS for a long time. And this document helps to kind of put all of the types of PLA in one spot. It makes for a nice set of guidelines and definitions, and I think it's a highly useful document, but it will be even more useful if we can get some additional feedback from folks in this room. So, thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Regent Johnstone.
Thank you, Chair Kraus. I had a comment and a couple of questions, I think some of which have been answered. I had a question on transcript identification, and I take it that your position is that it should be identifiable within the system, but perhaps not external. Is that the position?
That's the idea. There's some fear that a credit that appears as PLA, I mean, just like my own personal knee-jerk reaction to what is PLA before I learned about it. If the course is every bit as good, if we can assess that student and it's every bit as good as if they took the class at our institution, then putting PLA on there might make it look different or maybe less worthy to someone. So we should be able to track it and make sure that we believe that this is every bit as good, but we're not sure that we need to put it on there as something other.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question of whether full disclosure trumps the imprimatur of the university's endorsement, but I understand the position. Just a couple other questions.
Yeah, just to follow up on that a little bit. One of the things that's makes this really possible for us is something that MUS did a few years ago, and that's to implement common course numbering. So we've agreed as a system that many of our we'll transfer classes. We've got core requirements in there that we've all agreed to, and each institution will be a little different in each of these courses. Pick any one of them, Psych 101. The way it's taught at Billings or at Bozeman or Missoula will have its nuances. But we have agreed on sort of a set of common core requirements in that course. Once we agreed to that, it made it easy for us to accept and transfer each other's courses. We knew the requirements were about the same. Through PLA, if what we're doing is saying on our campus, this student has the learning outcomes and has demonstrated the learning outcomes for this course, now it's transferable everywhere. I think it is important that we indicate on the transcript, that we indicate on the record all right, the registrar's record, that was a PLA course, so that we can track that student's progress, so that we as a system and as an individual institution can track how much credit is being earned and how successful are those students. But then if that student decides to transfer, how they got that credit shouldn't be important, because it's still the faculty that did the assessment, just like they did the assessment if they sat in the classroom.
Understood. Just one other question and comment, if I could, Chair. When I read this, I think I correctly understood that the 25% cap was applied to the experiential learning. Do I have that right? But
Yes.
there was no cap to the other. I understand that the accreditation may have a 25% cap overall. Was there any discussion of any cap with respect to non-experiential learning or not?
There really wasn't a discussion. There was a big, broad, and deep discussion of the cap, whether or not a cap is at all appropriate, and what level a cap should be. We've got the accreditation, the accreditor's cap, and we have to work within it. And clearly, they have not been applying that to AP. And so there's sort of some work out there, but they don't provide any real guidelines on that. They just say 25% cap on prior learning. Right?
Okay.
And so we wanted to define that and make sure we understood it. Ultimately, as institutions throughout the country move to competency-based education, all of that would fall under that 25% cap. And that's why in many of the regions, these accrediting regions, there aren't caps anymore. Northwest is one of the few that has this cap set on it, and it's set pretty tight at 25%. So we needed to think through that pretty carefully.
I guess as I think about it, at least theoretically, someone could actually get a degree from one of the universities without ever taking a class at the physical university. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And I guess one of the anecdotes that I shared is one of my faculty members in graduate school was comped his baccalaureate degree from the University of Chicago, right? Not a fly-by-night institution, but he came out of the military and said, I want to study physics. They asked him a series of questions and said, you're in our graduate program. No baccalaureate degree needed.
Okay.
And I think what we've got to do is really get to this point of understanding faculty work, that they not only teach, but they assess. And if students come to us with the requirements of the degree, and we can effectively assess them and say, you're ready to go to work, whether it's as a welder or as a physicist or an art historian, if we can really prove that they've demonstrated the knowledges, the skills, and the habits of mind to take on that responsibility, then we do play a role in society as credentialers of knowledge, of skills, of habits of mind. That is a challenge, though, to say that, we're simply going to assess this person's learning and we find them to be ready for work. That's not something we've done recently.
Yeah, I would say that I would walk in this area before I ran, perhaps. But
absolutely.
Just one other observation, and I think I understand that and respect the need for respecting each institution's differences. But I also, I guess, as we move through this, would encourage us to develop as much as we can common standards, and both standards for PLA and the application of the standards between and among institutions. I'd be a little concerned that perhaps institutional idiosyncrasies could influence the way the program works. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Johnstone. Regent Sheehy?
One of the first discussions I had with you, Chancellor Nook, and as a regent, was about this very topic. And you'd been in Montana about 5 minutes, and I'd been a regent for about 10. And you made it understandable to me. And I've been following this with great interest because I, like Steve, was a skeptic. And as a regent deciding on this informational item, you want my feedback. My feedback is I have really grown to trust the work you've done. I believe I understand the details that have been provided, but I know that I don't know everything that you know about how this works. So the fact that you've had all of these people on the committee from different areas, That really makes a difference to me in assessing this. And Steve, the fact that you started off skeptical and have come around to it, that helps me too. So I think that it's important for your group to understand that as Regents assessing this, it's based on trust in the work that you've done. And your reports have established that trust. Chancellor Nook, the information you've provided to me throughout, I've grown to really trust. But it's important to me that what I'm hearing from you is that you have buy-in from the institutions, that you have buy-in from the faculty. I don't know about the students. I'd be interested in whether they have buy-in. But in order to approve this type of thing, I need to really believe that it's not going to water down our credentials. And I do believe that based on what you've told me, but that's the basis of how I'm looking at this. So I really thank you for the information. I think your process was so good and so transparent, and the reports you've given to us have made me a believer in this, and I truly wasn't when you and I spoke the first day of our jobs.
Yes, sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I'd just like to quickly respond to that and just let you know that I have given a lot of informal presentations about this and about 6 formal presentations to our Academic Standards Curriculum Review Committee and to deans and to the Faculty Senate and to various other constituencies looking for comments back. And you know, there is, for those faculty members that are unfamiliar with it, I mean, there's not too many people who come to me with PLA credits because I teach in the upper divisions of biology, and there's not that many ways that you could earn PLA credits. So it's a little abstract to a lot of people. So I think the more people learn about what it is, and the more you talk to people who actually deal with students who come in with PLA, the easier it is to accept that it's ongoing. There's nothing very strange in here, and it's just time to unify our definitions and our overall guidelines for how we deal with PLA in the MUS.
One of the things that we're doing to continue, one, this is a set of draft policies, and so we're continuing to get feedback, and I think as you read through this, you realize these really are guidelines, and I think, and in here is a review every 2 to 3 years. As that, we'll continue to tighten these up, and I think start to address some of Regent Johnstone's questions about bringing a little more concrete nature to how some of this works as our institutions work back and forth and we settle in as a system as to how this is going to work. One of the things that's coming up is MSU Billings is hosting a One MSU symposium on March 25th and 26th, and about 2/3 of that is on prior learning, the PLA, this document, and what prior learning means and for our system and for the institutions within the MSU family. And so these discussions will continue, and will, as any policy is, it's going to change and morph and come to suit the culture that is MUS, that develops within MUS around prior learning.
Yes, Major Robinson.
Thank you, Chair Krause. Again, thank you for all the work on this. And we don't say that lightly because we know this takes a lot more of your time than you typically devote to your primary job. So this type of work and the in-depth nature of this is really helpful to us. A question I have is regarding any, in your assessment, the PLA assessment, is there any defined costs that you have identified that would be incurred by either the student, prospective student, or by the university system? And how might we start to track that? And I'm curious, especially with any type of assessments, what cost would there be?
Yeah, it varies a little on the type of assessment, and I think that's why we haven't sort of defined this in there. But what we have done is to say that when a person signs up for a test out or is interested in receiving credit through prior learning assessment, that the fees for that are based on the cost, right? And so one of the problems that I've seen other systems wrestle with is that in their prior learning assessment, they simply charge the tuition rate to take the class. And yet, the faculty, we don't have them taking up a seat in a classroom. It isn't really the cost of delivering. It isn't the cost of the assessment. And so our institutions are going to have to think through, if a person is doing a challenge exam, how much human capital is involved in that? What's the compensation rate? When we set up these mechanisms to track and to record, what sort of costs are involved in that, and get a reasonable estimate of how much this is going to cost us to do, and not simply say, well, they'd pay $250 a credit, so let's charge them $750 for a 3-credit test out. That doesn't seem to make sense. So, but the type of assessment that's done, if they take a CLEP exam, that's pretty easy. You pay the CLEP fee. If they are going to sit down and do a portfolio review, where we may have somebody that sits with them for a couple hours to develop that portfolio and make sure they've got the information in a format that a faculty member or a group of faculty can actually assess, and then we have a team of faculty read through that and agree that, yeah, they do or don't. There's a lot more human capital in that sort of thing. How do we set up a fee structure for that? And it'll probably be a little different on each of our campuses, simply because we will approach that differently. It may even depend from department to department, depending on how those are set up. So right now, we don't know exactly how to structure all of that, and so the policy is open enough to let the institutions sort of figure that out, and we can keep working on it to come up and refine that policy a little bit.
Just one last thing is I'm glad you realized that, because I think this is a great transition point. This is good to help each institution, but where do we go from here? And I hope that the task force continues to take a look at that and takes a look at it from other states and maybe how they've approached that as well, so that we can translate it to what we do here. And I know each institution is going to be different. Like you said, we have such a variety here, but it would be good to have some guidelines there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Regent Albrecht.
Thank you, Chair Kraus. I know when we were at the Lumina conference, we learned a lot about this, and of course this is something that's happening nationwide with PLA. And I'm wondering, Deputy Commissioner Seck, if you can speak to the opportunities that PLA presents with capturing students that normally are not even on our radar, bringing them in, especially when they're going down a career track that sort of ends and they're looking at, I can't even bear the thought of going back to school, and then this opportunity sort of hooks them in and brings them down that different road seamlessly, rather than just saying, here, we're going to give you some free credits or some credentialing there. Can you speak to that?
Mr. Chair, Regent Albrecht, absolutely. Yesterday morning at Hometown Helena, I had the opportunity to just share some information about the number of adults that we have in Montana who have perhaps earned some post-secondary education but have not completed a degree. It's about 137,000 people in the state. These folks are employed at some level. They may be employed at a very high level, but I think if we can reach out to those folks and give them the opportunity to demonstrate that learning has occurred in some other way and give them a chance to earn some credit, as Dr. Ludmell mentioned, it really does make a difference with attracting those students to higher education, retaining them, and completing on a faster time. And then the other group are veterans, are returning veterans who receive an incredible amount of training while in service in the military. And PLA plays a huge role in that, in providing an opportunity to, again, assess that learning has occurred and provide credit opportunities where the students can demonstrate that.
Well, and along that line, I would just encourage this task force to make sure that, again, once again, as we are building something, that then we market what that is, so that we are capturing the folks that need to know that this exists and to really draw them in, which is a great enrollment potential.
Regent Williams.
I just want to tag along a little bit to what Regent Robinson said about costs for the PLA credits, and I think it's really important that that structure be really detailedly looked at. It seems to me intuitively that a person who's coming in to get PLA credit for one course will likely be coming in looking for PLA credits for multiple courses, and it seems that that could be a really kind of a difficult upfront cost coming straight back to school, because they'll still probably be taking a full load of courses on top of that first semester. So it seems to me that we would just want to take a really hard and fast look at that cost structure.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And the other thing that we haven't mentioned with these costs is that we need to be very clear and upfront with students about what they are. You know, this is what we're going to charge, this is where they're at, and they're well known, and going back to Regent Albrecht's point about marketing this, how that fits into the overall cost of this degree, really getting those things set out there. I think it is going to probably behoove our institutions to try to find a way to standardize these costs as much as possible. You know, if a portfolio review goes this, you know, is going to cost you this much. One of the things that's in this policy that I think is important, and it speaks to the point of a student getting some credits for these and then also being a full-time student, is we ask that the students actually be registered. They have to be enrolled, right? Because what we don't want to do is have them sort of candy shop this. I've been out, I've got these credits, evaluate them and tell me how much credit you're going to get. Go to another institution, do the same thing, right? Get registered, we'll help you. We'll take a look at these things. We'll give you credit at our institution. If we've got the degree program, enroll with us. We'll evaluate them. If we don't shop this around, right? Because it really ought to be about helping this student get through the program that they're looking to get through, get in the education that they need. So come to us. Then it's important that we have these cost structures laid out so they know exactly what it's going to cost. They know exactly how the mechanism is going to work. They know the possibility of getting the credit or not getting the credit, and they know exactly how it fits into their degree program, and then what that means to their time to degree.
Regent Williams.
So this is on a different track. When we were talking about transcripting, I was kind of confused about how the outline of courses looked like, so I pulled up my own just so I could make sure I was understanding what's happening. And on my transcript, AP credits are in a separate section, and those are identified. So I guess I'm curious if you could describe, since we're equating AP to be similar to PLA, the distinction between how we would identify those classes differently.
Just a reminder to turn them off when you're not using.
Yeah, I think that, you know, there's this is one of those points that needs to be worked out yet, exactly how we're going to identify them and how we're going to track them. And what gets sort of labeled on the transcript, the thing that everybody in the world will see, you know, when you send your transcripts out, and what sets back in the record that we use to track things, right? And AP is one of those that is something that we had no real control over, right? They took the course in high school. There's an outside agency that did the testing, did the assessment, and says their score is this, we're going to accept it. That's a little different than a student who comes to us and says, you know, I think I've got the learning and the knowledges, the skills, and the habits of mind for Physics 110. And so we set up a challenge exam, and we give them that exam, and we say, yeah, you really have the skills and everything you need to meet our competencies, our learning outcomes for Physics 110. And we're going to give you credit for that specific course. Now, I think we ought to transcript that and record it as having, you know, so the outside world says you completed that course. We're going to track it a little differently so we can watch that student's progress, and we know how many credits have been generated, not just by that student, but by students in the university and within the system. And so that's what we're really thinking about, is some of these differences. And we need a larger conversation about that yet, and exactly how to handle that within the student's record. And as I've said, you know, figuring out how to do PLA and do the assessments is actually the easy part. The really hard part is the back of the house. How do you handle the record, the transcript, the financial aid, the admissions process, the advising? All of that is where we can trip students up. It's where we can have problems with our own records and things. So those are some things we've got to work through, but clearly we recognize this sort of difference between AP credits, CLEP credits, portfolio assessments, and these different ways of achieving and assessing learning that occurred before they arrived on our campus. Yeah, thank you.
I appreciate you detailing the conceptual difference there. I think that helped a lot with my understanding of how those things would go through. Thanks.
President Engstrom.
Thank you, Regent Krause. Chancellor Nook, you talked about the Northwest Commission with their 25% limit. So we are pretty well represented on the Northwest Commission. Valerie Martinez from Helena College, Lynn Etkart from Blue Cross Blue Shield here in Helena is a non-academic member, and myself. I'm quite sure that the AP and those kinds of things don't get included in that 25% limit. I've never been there when we've had a discussion that would indicate that that is part of the PLA 25%. But my point is, if there are limitations imposed by the Northwest Commission and our leadership in this area bumps up against those limitations, I think we're in a good position to initiate the right kind of conversations with the Commission to change things if that represents an unreasonable limit in today's world. So I don't think we need to just acquiesce to some arbitrary limit that they might have if it doesn't fit today's world in Montana.
Thank you, and we talked about that just a little bit. And one of the things we did look at very seriously is the other accrediting agencies and what their limits are on this. And I think that Northwest at some point, well, all of the accrediting agencies throughout the country are really wrestling with this concept of PLA and a competency-based education. And then some, past errors by institutions that have abused their obligations to students and their rights to offer a degree. And so it is sort of a balance. How do you accredit an institution and make sure that they're handling their responsibilities for academic rigor appropriately? But I think as competency-based education develops and we become more comfortable that the rigor is there, that faculty are really in control of the process and assessing the knowledge that's been learned and gained, then these accrediting agencies will see that. We're still going to have to figure out how to do the financial aid. That's the really big elephant in the room, is how do you handle that? But I really appreciate your comments. I think there will be some things that we may want to do with the commission at some point.
Thank you. I know we got to move on. I haven't said anything yet, so, we heard this morning about innovation is the hallmark of passion, and I developed a passion for this subject it was an outgrowth of the work with veterans that I've been doing over the last, just going to the meetings, basically, as I referred to earlier. Maybe, and as I hear some of the concerns, occasionally I hear some concerns about, are we controlling this correctly? And I think about the 25% number as the exact indication. Anytime I hear 25%, I think, why isn't it 24 or 26, right? That's the first thing I think on those arbitrary numbers. That's probably because I'm not the control side of the world. I'm the trusting the serendipity and the chaos of the universe side, right? And I would just say there are two of us here who have PLA in our portfolio, right? There's AP classes from Regent Williams, and I have PLA in my portfolio too. As a non-traditional student, I came in, I wanted to reduce my time to degree, I wanted to save a few bucks. I CLEP'd English. And I'll leave it up to you to decide whether I'm sufficiently facile in that subject. I think that we hear that students who come with PLA persist and succeed to a higher degree than others, and sometimes they even go on to become regents. And I'd point that out to you as you consider this subject in the future. Dr. Seck, next subject.
Many thanks to Ms. Jones, Chancellor Nook, and Dr. Ledmill, and the entire task force for their work on this. Thank you. I'd like to now invite the 7 MUS two-year college deans to come forward and join us at the front. Find a chair. Dean Bingham is already up front. Victoria Clark was not able to be with us today, so Rock Turner is filling in as her stead as the director representative. And there are chairs up here. Mr. Chair, members of the board, very happy to provide this board with an update on the comprehensive mission expansion plans for the two-year colleges under the MUS, and very appreciative of the work that Dean Bingham, Dean Wolf, Dean Hayatella, Dean Garrick, Interim Dean Baker, Interim Dean Kratke, and Director Clark have been doing. And just to give you a little bit of background, this work began back in 2011 with the support from the Lumina Foundation, the support from the Regents, with the goal to make two-year education in Montana accessible, more affordable, and better understood. And at that time, around 2010, 2011, Montana's two-year education was trailing most of the two-year institutions across the country. And so we really had a historic moment, a historic opportunity. In August of 2011, the Board of Regents approved Montana's first ever comprehensive two-year mission statement. It was developed by the two-year leaders, the faculty, and students. And that was, when the board approved that mission, they requested that the former colleges of technology go through a planning process to adopt that mission, and in fall 2011, they extended that to include Gallatin College programs and Bitterroot College programs. In 2012, the 7 colleges of technology and college programs were renamed colleges, and in March 2012, the first comprehensive mission expansion plans were approved by this board for those 7 colleges. In March 2013, the board approved the first update and asked the colleges to come back annually through my office to provide an update to you. This year, 2015, marks the 3rd update, and I'm very proud of the phenomenal leadership of the campus CEOs, deans, and directors. The comprehensive mission is very simple. In fact, if you take a look at it, it has 5 tenets. These tenets basically make up the building block of the American community college: university transfer, workforce development, developmental education, lifelong learning, and community development. Some amazing work has occurred over the past year with these 7 colleges, and I'd like to just pull out from their reports a few items for you. Gallatin College, MSU, launched a diverse array of internal and external communication efforts to extol the value and credibility of their Associate of Arts and Associate of Science offerings. Great Falls College, MSU, currently has 18 transfer articulation agreements, and 5 programs of study are in place with 4-year campuses. Most recently, the college implemented a newly signed articulation agreement with the MSU Bozeman College of Engineering for 1+3 transfer option for 9 engineering disciplines. Recently, Helena College signed 3 articulation agreements for transfer degrees that guarantee admission to 4-year programs, bringing the total number of articulation agreements to 14. Highlands College, Montana Tech created transfer degree MOUs in business administration, communications, elementary education, healthcare informatics, recreation, sociology, and psychology. These examples represent 2-year education's commitment to our students to create pathways to the baccalaureate. That's what university transfer is about. Workforce development. And I'd like to just pull out a few examples of local responsiveness of these colleges. Montana Precision Products, CCAST, a new Butte-based aerospace company, had significant need for more welders. Highlands College at Montana Tech immediately pivoted to help them start a new certificate program. Bitterroot Job Service asked Bitterroot College, to develop and deliver a certified nurse assistant training program to satisfy the unmet demands of local nursing facilities. Of the 30 students who completed the CNA at Bitterroot College, 80%, that's 24, were immediately placed in local jobs. City College at MSUB offered non-credit CDL workforce training in December and January to assist with high demand in the area of CDL to respond to the needs of the Bakken and local ag industry. Gallatin College, MSU, started a computer numerical coded machining program this past fall to meet the local manufacturing companies, creating a workforce employment opportunity within that. Great Falls College, MSU, was the primary force in attracting ADF International to expand their operations into the western United States and locate in Great Falls. In early February, Dan Rooney, the general manager, spoke to the legislature, citing that 55% of his beginning welders are graduates of Great Falls College, MSU. 25% of his workforce are from other two-year programs in Montana. An increased presence of aeronautic manufacturing in the Helena region has provided an opportunity for Helena College to develop targeted partnerships with corporations like Boeing in fields such as computer numerically controlled and metal fabrication. Helena College is listed as one of the 5 preferred educational providers for Boeing Corporation. Missoula College is leading Montana's new $15 million TAC grant focused on healthcare, which you've heard about. And medical assistant and medical coding programs were started at Gallatin College, MSU, to meet critical needs. There's an incredible amount of things happening with developmental and remedial education. I just want to highlight a few. A new learning and testing center at Bitterroot College, new advising and retention strategies at City College, Ed-Ready implementation at Gallatin College, MSU, new partnerships and efforts at Great Falls College, MSU to build high-tech bridges with the ABE High School Equivalency Program, through an innovative software program, which we heard about yesterday with Helena College's ACT award, Starfish. Helena College has developed an amazing advising, retention, and default prevention program. Highlands College has adopted Ed-Ready for all of its developmental math classes. And Missoula College is building bridges with the ABE program in that program. And in the interest of time, I'm only going to highlight a few examples for lifelong learning and community development. But City College is looking for ways to change their website, which will allow new pages to reach out to adult learners and provide access for things like prior learning assessment. Helena College has developed a community speakers bureau. Missoula College now offers dual enrollment at 8 schools for 453 high schools. And City College hosts events annually, such as their 911 event, Remembrance Ceremony. And Gallatin College has done an amazing amount of work as a result of their surveys and community focus groups. And Highlands College has established a community advisory board. One thing I want to make very clear is the fact that I'm highlighting the mission expansion reports of the 7 two-year colleges within MUS. That does not negate the incredible work being done by the 3 community college districts in the state, Flathead Valley Community College, Miles Community College, and Dawson Community College, to serve their regional needs. In fact, they have been providing the comprehensive community college mission for decades and have played a huge role in helping us advance that mission across the state. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Eric Rose to the podium to provide you with a very brief update on how the two-year colleges are connecting with the Main Street Montana Pillar 1 initiative.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Seck. Mr. Chair, members of the board, as you know, Montana University System is the implementation lead for Pillar 1 of Main Street Montana, which is train and educate tomorrow's workforce today. As the lead, we have charged each of the 7 two-year colleges as well as the community colleges with providing us a monthly update of their activities related to the MSM project. These updates are then uploaded into a database that generates reports for the governor's purview. As of last week, there are 91 completed Pillar 1 activities from our two-year institutions, which constitutes 35% of the total MSM project. If you include Pillar 5 activities, which come from some of our two-year institutions as well as the 4-year research institutions, higher education accounts for 50%, half of the MSM project to date. I would like to discuss a couple major trends, major themes that I've seen from across the entire state. The first trend is the very positive impact that recent TAC grants have had on our ability to address workforce needs and to align our courses with current economic standards. Rev Up Montana, formerly SWAMI, has allowed institutions to align courses with our changing economy. Great Falls College has tripled its welding output by scheduling 3 cohort classes. Dawson Community College has infused money into programs critical to their region, such as welding and oil and gas industry safety. RevUp has allowed us to expand, but has also allowed us to be nimble when needed. Due to changing employment opportunities in the Bakken, City College has readjusted some of its oil and gas offerings. We're hoping and expecting that the Montana Healthcare Grant will yield similar favorable results. The next kind of pillar that we've seen across all of the two-year campuses is the increased employment and educational opportunities regarding transfer. There are several new 1+3 and 2+2 transfer opportunities and programs that have gone online this year, and many more that are in the works. New simulators in fields such as healthcare and machining are giving students the confidence and the experience that employers are looking for. There's a high interest in matching our 2-year degrees and 1-year certificate programs with apprenticeships. As you heard, Helena College, with a tremendous amount of support from industry, has created a sheet metal apprenticeship program. The next theme is how building local partnerships and utilizing advisory boards has really increased the academic potential in Montana. Through a partnership with Applied Materials, Flathead Valley Community College received a large amount of advanced machines to provide their students a greater experience on using machines from a variety of vendors. Miles Community College partnered with Prairie Educational Service Area to provide a teachers conference with over 200 local teachers attending and 60 of them receiving college credit. The last clear point that I'd like to discuss today is that the increases in college access and college visibility at our high schools has been tremendous in the past year. Dual enrollment has seen huge increases, especially at some of our smaller institutions. Gallatin College currently has 112 dual enrollment students, and Bitterroot College has seen an increase of 350% in dual enrollment the last 2 years. Career fairs, financial aid nights, and Big Sky Pathways have all played a role in improving college visibility at high schools. Future activities with adult learners are also in various design phases at many colleges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. So as you can see and as you've read from the reports, a lot is happening. Obviously, there are some challenges that have also been recognized by the deans and CEOs. And one of those challenges has been dealing with financial resources and staffing necessary to accommodate the growth. We've been able to mitigate this in a few ways, including the infusion of the TAC grants, which you've heard about, We also focused our legislative OTO funds that were focused on workforce development and dual credit to a performance funding initiative for dual credit. We redirected our Carl Perkins Reserve funds to support Big Sky Pathways development at the two-year colleges, and reaching out to other funding sources such as the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation via the University of Montana to support EdReady implementation has helped a great deal. And there's, of course, been other funding sources available through CALE, Lumina, and so forth, as we've discussed. The power of partnerships is huge. Partnerships working together, partnerships working with business and industry, as you've heard, and partnerships working with other agencies. So, Mr. Chair, members of the board, the deans, CEOs, and director are here to help answer questions.
Thank you. There is so much going on, and I think you just touched on that. Thank you all. Questions for the deans and CEOs? Regent Johnstone.
Yes. Thanks, Chair Kraus. I just had one question, and maybe it's directed to John, and that is, was there a reason we didn't include the community colleges in this broad-based review and strategy?
The main reason is that when this process started, Regent Johnstone, the community colleges were doing it. They embodied and fully had the comprehensive mission there. So when we started this process back in 2010 and even before, we were looking at moving forward with the former colleges of technology and two-year programs. So this comprehensive mission expansion effort has focused on those 7 colleges. The 3 community college districts already have the comprehensive mission.
And then just, particularly given what Commissioner Buzzi told us about some skepticism among industry about our responsiveness, I would hope that we would arm her with some of the anecdotal information about how, in fact, we have been there are lots of instances where there's been very quick responses to requests.
Yes, sir. Other questions from the regents or comments from the regents? How about from the deans and CEOs there? Anything you'd like to add? Dr. Wolf?
I'm never shy of words, as my family would tell you. I just want to thank the Commissioner's Office and certainly recognize the good work of all of my colleagues. And in just a few minutes, when I'm going through our mission review for Great Falls College, it really does speak to our tribal partners, our 3 community colleges, and all of us to do the good work that we're doing to meet workforce need, economic development, community development, and to help those students who maybe this might be the 10th time they've tried to come back to school and be successful. So I think I can speak for all of us to say that we're very proud of the missions that we have.
Thank you. And actually, as I look at it, a progress report for increasing access to higher education, 2-year college mission expansion plan. I go back to former Governor Schweitzer, to Mary Moe, to meetings with them where we were so woefully just starting out, I think, with the exception of the community colleges just starting out, and the renaming process and the reimagining process and the Lumina Foundation and all of the things that have iterated over the past, I don't know how many years that is now, 5 or 6 or 7 years. I look at this and how far we've come and say, well done, and how far we have yet to go. Anything else? Then we are...
Chair Kraus, I
Yes.
would just make one observation. I'm looking at the enrollment information, and the 2-year colleges have had a 77% increase in enrollment over the 10-year period, which is extraordinary, particularly relative to our other experience. So, well done.
Thank you. And I guess we're on to, that ends the informational items. So Chair Tuss, what's your pleasure? Do you want to go on with this last thing? Do you want to break for a minute? Do you want to move it to next time? What do you want to do? I'm sorry.
No, let's move on
All
right
right,
now
so-
to that action item.
All right, we're moving on to the action item, and we will endeavor to persevere.
Mr. Chair, as I introduce this action item, I just again want to thank the deans and CEOs of the two-year colleges and the 3 community college presidents and our tribal college president partners for all working together for the good common cause of two-year education. Great Falls College MSU will host a 7-year accreditation visit in April 20th and 22nd, 2015. As a part of this process, the college has been engaged in the review of its mission, vision, and core themes. And Dr. Wolf is here today to provide you with both an overview and an update of the college's mission, vision, and core themes. Dr. Wolf?
Thank you very much. We can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Again, I want to go back and recognize two-year education in Montana. When we're working with these Department of Labor grants, we're looking at 3 governance systems when we have all of our partners together. So those of us who are part of MUS report directly to our flagship universities and to the commissioner. The tribals have their own governance process, as do the 3 community colleges who have their locally elected boards and the citizens in their areas. So just kind of a quick overview of what two-year education looks like in the state. So I'm calling out something in this particular diagram. You'll see that Great Falls College and Helena College have a different color here, and that's because we are considered standalone community colleges. Chair Tuss asked me yesterday why it was I was sitting at this table, and I said because Daniel and I have independently accredited institutions, and that doesn't mean that we're better or different. It's just that our scope of work, I guess, is a little bit more comprehensive, and we really are more like our partners that you'll see under our parent institutions. So that is a little bit of a different. We are responsible for development of our own budgets. We do our own, like I said, accreditation reports, which we have ours coming the end of April. We're responsible for all of our own hires, fiscal management, hiring. We have our own academic faculty senates. We have our own processes. So we're very much probably more similar like the 3 community colleges. Next slide, please. So let's go to Great Falls College MSU, and this picture kind of tells you who our students are. You've seen these before when we do our budget reviews in the fall. So we don't seem to be able to budge that 72% female. We thought when we tripled the welding enrollment that we might see that go down a little bit and our male enrollment go up, but that has not been the case. So we're going to continue to work on that. Next slide, please. Average class size 17.2. This is really important that we have an opportunity to provide a small class size. With our 1+3 engineering transfer options, someone thinks they want to be an engineer, come to Great Falls College, you've got half the tuition, you've got a small class size, you get to connect with your professor to find out if engineering is really right for you, and then you're going to be well prepared to move on down to Bozeman. So we're very proud of that, and you'll see all the other statistics there. The one I want to point out is 39% of our students are wholly online students. We have a large online program. Next slide, please. Our staff, 85 full-time administrative and support staff, 45 full-time faculty, 3 part-time faculty, 95 adjunct. For an annual payroll, this was in fiscal year 13, $9.8 million. Next slide, please. Going back to the online courses and degrees, you'll see 3 degree options, totally online, 3 certificates of applied science degrees, 3 of those, 4 of associate applied science, 3 of the professional certificate option. This spring, 126 online-only courses are being offered. This really helps us with that dual enrollment because we have so many students in the rural areas who their schools cannot provide some of the higher level courses, and they're able to access those through the Digital Academy and through what we offer. Next slide, please. Early college, again, you can call that dual credit, dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment. We're very proud of that work. Heidi is so pleased that all of our faculty have the Class 8 license, so that allows them to teach for those dual credit classes. And we're working so closely with our high school partners. You'll see in my bottom left, it might be your bottom right, the first dual credit concurrent class of Math 121, college algebra, was held at Great Falls High. They had 29 students and 27 passed with a C- or better. So the faculty wrote us many things, many comments from the students, but we're proud of that work. Next slide. So one of the things you're doing, you heard and you saw yesterday our new agreement with the MSU Alumni Foundation, and we do have a new development director, is the amount of scholarships that we currently have and that will continue to increase. And this makes such a difference for our students who come to us with totally different needs, because so many of them are working at least part-time, if many are not working full-time and raising families, also first-generation students. So we're proud of being able to provide this assistance. Next slide, please. So when you talk about the comprehensive community college mission, we do reach out to our community partners, our business partners all the time on a daily basis. And this just shows you how involved we are. In the fall, we started a college community choir, the first one that our institution's ever had. We had 60 people in the choir, 20 were our college students, 40 from the community. Do customized training when a company has specific needs for their workforce. We established the transborder welding testing facility for both the AWS and CWB. We have an outreach program. We also, Heidi, how many program advisory committees do we have?
Dr. Wolf, we have about 24 program advisory boards.
Okay, and I really appreciated what Daniel was saying this morning about how, as we look at this apprenticeship model and the grant, of using them maybe in a little bit different way and perhaps meeting more often and getting more guidance from them on a continual basis. And I'm really proud of the fact that my 7-member executive team, we serve on over 40 community boards, councils, and committees. So we are in the community all the time. Thank you. Next slide. So we contracted with the Economic Modeling Specialties International last year, and this is the economic impact that we have in our region. I don't think I need to read that, but that's pretty significant, the difference that we make in our communities. We're very proud of that. You might wonder why the effect of student spending is low. That's because most of our students are already living in the community. They've already been paying rent or making house payments, buying groceries, doing all those sorts of things already. Okay, next slide. So what I'm really up here to talk about, like I told you I like to use words, is our mission. And we believe in this mission very strongly, and it mirrors the comprehensive community college work that we need to do. But if somebody asked me to memorize this statement and be able to go out in the community and tell them what our mission statement is, I would just look at them and go, I don't have a clue. It's too long. So we're in the middle of doing a mission review, a vision and a mission review process right now. We didn't want to change it as we were preparing for this 7-year visit from the Northwest Commission. As anybody who's gone through that, you know you don't want to make those big changes. But we're making the move now so that when that is done, we can go ahead and move forward. And it's going to be hard to capture all of the work that we do in something that might be closer to 10 to 12 words, but we're sure working on it. Thank you. So the next slide, this is what I just passed around because it's awfully hard to see on the screen. You'll see that our mission is on the top, and then below that are our 4 core themes, which is part of the Northwest Commission's infrastructure. We chose workforce development, transfer preparation, academic preparation, and community development. And underneath that, you'll see goal statements, and then you will see our core indicators of how well we're doing. So we're going to be reviewing all of that as well as we develop that new vision and that new mission. Next slide, please. So mission expansion, John just talked about that, so I don't think we probably need to spend any more time on that. Next slide. So as we're developing kind of our next direction and building our new strategic plan, we brought in a consultant to help us start to develop a strategic enrollment management plan. And you'll see the 6 steps there, and clear mission and goals. That's what we're working on right now. We've got a phenomenal data researcher collecting all kinds of data, and the faculty love having access to that data. We've really built that culture in. So now we're going to be looking at enrollment infrastructure. Do we need to be packaging our classes differently? Do we need to do more evening weekend? Do we want to do a block schedule? Do we want to do a modified block schedule? Who are the people, who are the populations we want to reach out to? Those are kind of the questions, and then we'll develop the rest of the information based on that. Next slide, please. So putting it all together, we have a very strong shared governance system at the college. And we have a college planning, budgeting, and analysis committee. That's what you see the center there. And that has students, it has faculty, administrators, and staff involved, meeting on a monthly basis. We're building our budget for next year. And Common Ground was the operational plan that former Dean Schaefer put together. And we're working on this other work with the mission and vision, and we'll eventually have a new operational plan, and we might call it Common Ground because we all know what that means. We talked about SIM. Facilities master plan will come after we have all the other planning done. We had an academic master plan. It was a modified version of that where we reached out to the community and did an environmental scan to say, what do you want us to be doing? And then you, again, take all of that work and you say, what kind of technology do we need to have to make all of this work together? So we're very excited about this process. Dr. Stevens, our CFO, who's here at the table with me, has done an excellent job leading that effort. And the last slide, please. So this is our timeline through February of 2016. And you'll see some feedback loops in there, and you kind of see where we are in that. There's a lot happening after July through next February because that's when we hope to have the new strategic plan in place and then build all the other pieces. So we stand ready for any questions.
Questions for Dean Wolf? Questions? Any questions? Thank you very much. Very impressive.
You're welcome.
And if I hear no objections from the committee, I'll move this action item forward for consideration by the full board. And with that, the 2-year and Community College Committee will adjourn and turn it back over to Regent Tuss.
Thank you, Regent Krause. Deputy Commissioner, thank you for your time. We are now going to move on to the Staff and Comp Committee. I think this is going to be a relatively short piece of our agenda this morning, so after this piece of the agenda, we will take a break, but I think that we can burn through this pretty quick. So with that, we'll move into the Staff and Comp Committee portion of our meeting this morning, and I will turn it over to Deputy Commissioner McRae.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, first up is a consent agenda that includes what I would describe as routine or normal staff items and some Professor Emeritus awards.
Is there any desire by members of the committee to segregate any particular item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, that will move to action later on this morning, and we'll move to the information item. Deputy Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, when we put this information item on the agenda, as you see, it was for the purpose of apprising the board of some employment-related matters before the legislature, so I will just quickly tick through a list for you. I'm going to talk first about Senate Bill 143. The Commissioner already provided yesterday an overview for you of that firearms bill. So that is the guns on campus legislation. And as the Commissioner said yesterday, we have worked hard to convey to the elected policymakers, the elected lawmakers, get information in front of them that it is a fact that our campuses across the state are very, very safe places, statistically much safer than off-campus communities at large. So we are conveying that we believe we have a very responsible and respectful policy and past on the issue of firearms and how they can be managed and handled and how they shouldn't. That issue speaks primarily to the, or that perspective, much of what we've heard on this issue speaks to the safety issue. But I would be probably derelict if I did not bring to the board's attention that if we ever had a day where firearms were on campus, you would have a significant workplace issue as well, a significant employment issue to deal with. I have testified against guns in the workplace bills for since the 1997 session. In a prior job with the Department of Administration, anytime there were guns in the workplace bills that would allow state employees to bring guns to work, agencies have consistently opposed that. During those 10 sessions, going back to 1997, in my judgment, there were probably two reasons that the legislature has never saw fit or desired to arm the state workforce wall to wall, or at least to give the state workforce the option of coming to work armed. The first reason is a public expectation that when customers of state services interact with public entities, there's a reasonable expectation that they will interact with personnel of the public entities, and that our employees will carry out their duties and responsibilities without the distraction of carrying firearms. And as you know, Senate Bill 143 is not just a concealed carry bill, but it's also an open carry bill. In my opinion, the second reason the legislature at least has never saw fit to either encourage or allow the carrying of firearms in any workplace other than their desire for guns in the university system is the workplace issue. Employee to employee interactions, employee to supervisor interactions, and supervisor to employee actions. So we share those same interests in the university system. Yet, if we had guns on campus, we'd be in a situation where if students or customers of the university came to the university leadership and expressed a concern, asked if a faculty member or a particular staff member should really be carrying a gun, under that legislation, our answer would have to be, well, sure he should, if he wants to. Similarly, if an employee came to the Human Resources Department and said, well, should the employee really be carrying a gun into the performance evaluation meeting or into this corrective counseling session? Under Senate Bill 143, our answer would be, well, sure, he should if he wants to. So that's the difficult workplace issue that would be in front of us. The commissioner already yesterday talked about the public safety issue and the fact that this bill would allow and provide for concealed and open carry in the stadiums. But you would have a significant workplace issue in front of you. There are reasons that the legislature has never saw fit to arm the rest of the state workforce, the 14,000 who are outside of the university system. You are a governing board, an employer, over 8,000 employees in the university system, and you can see why this issue has human resource directors concerned. Another bill that is an employment-related bill, House Bill 13, the commissioner already spoke to the good efforts of the product that is House Bill 13. It provides the university system, would provide approximately $14 million in general fund appropriation over the biennium to put towards our ability to continue to recruit and retain capable, excellent faculty and staff. That bill has not yet been scheduled for a hearing, but the commissioner covered that yesterday. House Bill 59 was a bill sponsored by and requested by the Teacher Retirement Board. It is a bill that is a statutory obligation of the Teacher Retirement Board every 2 years to come forth with an actuarial recommendation related to our university system's retirement program in the defined contribution program. So some regions may recall in the past that we've had discussions that highlighted the differences between the traditional state-defined benefit pension retirement program and the defined contribution plan, which is more of a public sector equivalent of a 401k. So for the majority of our faculty and administrators, they are on that defined contribution plan. They are not under the teacher retirement system or the public employee retirement system. There was a bill last session that would have called for an actuarial adjustment that would have had significant fiscal impact on the university system. The bill did not pass. That bill came up again this session. It is tabled in the House State Administration Committee, so it probably is going nowhere. It would have had a fiscal impact that would have required, and I won't go into the complexity any further, it would have had a fiscal impact of about $11 million a year. And where that comes from is for every faculty member, contract professional, or administrator who is enrolled in that defined contribution plan, the employer, the university system, makes not only a contribution toward that employee's account, but we also must make a contribution towards the teacher retirement system that is an actuarial obligation related to when we transferred from the teacher retirement system to that defined contribution plan. So right now we make about roughly $10, $11 million a year in supplemental payments to the TRS. This bill would have doubled it, would have been a significant fiscal concern, but it is tabled. Lastly, and then we're done, Senate Bill 179. Senate Bill 179 would have modified the probably the State Human Rights Act in non-discrimination law. So under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and under Montana statute, Human Rights Act, non-discrimination, as you know, and it's probably no surprise to you, it is illegal for an employer, for a public entity, even also in private accommodations, to discriminate on certain bases, protected classes. So this bill would have added gender identity and sexual orientation to the traditional protected classes like sex, age, race, religion, national origin, and so forth. You might remember that the board recently, about a year ago, adopted our Personnel Policy 703, our non-discrimination policy, and the board has already added gender identity, sexual orientation to our policies. Senate Bill 179 died in the Senate. It did not become law, but it is still, for lack of a better word, the law of the land in the Montana university system, that we will not discriminate on the basis of any of the statutory protected classes or sexual orientation or gender identity. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the quick flyover of employment-related legislative developments.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Are there questions from the board? Are there any questions from the board? Regent Johnstone.
There was a decision a couple of days ago, I think, from a district court relative to the ability to change, I can't remember, something to do with health or something. Does that apply to us, or?
Mr. Chairman and Regent Johnstone, there was a decision in district court that applies to the public employee retirement system. And that is the system that covers the vast majority of our classified staff and maybe a few professional staff as well. In the last legislative session, there was a big overhaul bill to both the public employee retirement system and to the teacher retirement system. In the last session, part of the overhaul of the public employee retirement system involved a lot of components. Usually the legislature, when there's an actuarial problem, can adjust the time span for how long is the time span for actuarial soundness. You could adjust the employer's contribution, which would affect the solvency. You could adjust the employee's contribution. All of those options are on the table, and one of the options that they exercised in that bill was to reduce a future benefit for employees that's called the Guaranteed Annual Base Adjustment, or GABA in retirement law speak. The legislature in about 1999 increased that Guaranteed Annual Base Adjustment to 3%. I think it had maybe been 1.5%, I can't remember. But anyway, they did reduce that Guaranteed Annual Base Adjustment, and the court held that that Guaranteed Annual Base Adjustment had a contractual status, and that the legislature could not and should not have just unilaterally reduced that benefit because in the court's view it had a contract status, and the decision said that the legislature had a number of other options in front of it, including adjusting the employer's contribution and so forth. I don't think there is any immediate impact because the upholding of the GABA benefit, I don't believe triggered any other fallback funding mechanisms. Deputy Commissioner Commissioner Christian?
Well, I think that's the path we've been on.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I believe that's the path we've been on. So an adverse decision on that maybe would have changed things, but I think we will generally stay the course at this point.
Regent Krause. Oh, you didn't have a question. Are there further questions for the Deputy Commissioner? Further questions from the board? Seeing none, thank you, Deputy Commissioner. We will be done with this section of our meeting this morning, and at this point we will take a 15-minute break.